Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping inside the walls of something ancient, cold, and dangerously romanticized. Not a battlefield, not a dungeon, a castle. Because despite what the stories told you, this place isn't safe. It creaks, it leaks, it bites, and every stone is just waiting for the right moment to fall. We're talking about what it was really like to live in a medieval castle, where the beds crawled, the food fought back, and the walls had moods. Where every shadow in the corridor might be hiding something hungry, and every torch that flickers out could mean more than just darkness. This isn't a fairy tale. This is living in a death trap. So before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet, terrible, forgotten corners of the past. Close your eyes if you want, because once we step through these gates, you won't just hear the story. You'll feel the cold. You'll smell the rot. You'll hear the rats scratching in the walls. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why the people who lived here never truly slept. The castle is waiting. Let's go inside. You wake up to stone. Not majestic stone, not ancient and noble stone, just cold, damp, unforgiving rock pressing against your spine like a forgotten tomb. The air stinks of ash and mildew. Somewhere above you, something creaks. A timber beam moaning under the weight of another miserable medieval morning. You open your eyes, and for a moment, you wonder if you've died. But no, death would be quieter. This is a castle. The walls of your room sweat. Literally. Condensation slides down in rivulets, gathering in cracks, forming puddles that will soon birth fungus colonies with political aspirations. The ceiling above you is bowed and dark, its wooden planks blackened by smoke from 100 years of indoor fires and bad architectural planning. A chunk of plaster flakes off and lands beside your head with the soft thud of damp rot. You stare at it for a moment and decide not to move. If you pretend you're part of the furniture, maybe the castle won't notice you. That's what happened to the last servant. No one's seen him since Tuesday. You're not in a tower. Those are for nobles or prisoners or noble prisoners. You sleep in the service wing, though wing is generous. It's a drafty corner wedged between the granary and the rat farm. The rats don't know it's a farm, but management does. There are no windows, just a thin arrow slit high above, letting in a single beam of light that seems personally offended by its surroundings. Your mattress is straw, technically, but the straw is half decayed, flattened into a lumpy mat by years of other bodies, and by you, curled fetal, clutching the one wool blanket that hasn't been washed since the last crusade. You don't know what color it used to be. You don't ask. What matters is that it's warm, smells faintly of sheep and moldy cheese, and doesn't actively bite you. Unlike the pillow, which houses a thriving flea dynasty that colonized your scalp sometime around Lent. Your legs ache before you even move them. Your joints creak louder than the rafters. You're 19, which here is basically elderly. You've already lost 2 teeth, gained 3 chronic ailments, and developed a sixth sense for incoming weather shifts based on the pain in your left kneecap. It's raining outside. You're sure of it. The cold has settled in your bones like an unwanted inheritance. Outside your door, or rather, the curtain pretending to be one, you hear movement. Heavy boots on stone. A slammed bucket. Someone yelling in what sounds like anger, but might just be their normal tone. Voices in the castle don't whisper. They echo, especially when accompanied by metal scraping on metal, like knives being sharpened or armor being dragged. You hope it's the kitchen staff. You hope it's not the dungeon guard again. He always stops to complain about his piles and somehow ends up eating your breakfast. You sit up. Bad idea. The world tilts. The air shifts. Your spine makes a sound like snapping twigs, and for a moment you think the ceiling has come down. But no, it's just you adjusting to being vertical. Your feet hit the stone floor and are immediately introduced to the concept of hypothermia. You shuffle forward, avoiding the puddle that definitely wasn't there last night. A leaky roof? A leaking pipe? No, it's just the wall, weeping. A rat watches you from across the room. He's missing an eye and possibly half his soul, but he's been here longer than you. You nod respectfully. He blinks back. In the castle, respect keeps things civil. You've seen what happens when people forget that. You pull on your tunic. Wool, scratchy, always damp no matter the season. And you try not to think about the smell. It's not your fault. No one has clean clothes. Laundry day is a fantasy, like good weather or compassionate nobles. You wear what you have until it rots off your body or bursts into flames from spontaneous despair. Someone shouts from the hall, "Kitchen's late." It's not directed at you, but it's also not directed at you. You move quick now, because in a castle, moving slowly is the fastest way to become a cautionary tale. Or a ghost. And this place already has too many of both. As you step out into the corridor, the full smell of the castle hits you. Damp stone, cooked cabbage, smoke, sweat, and something sweeter, more sinister. Mildew velvet, maybe. Or the perfume of the last noblewoman to die here. It clings to the walls like regret. This is home. Fortress, prison, and death trap. All in one. You take a breath and start your day. The castle doesn't wait. The castle never waits. Your bed is technically a mattress in the same way a wet sack of hay in a wheelbarrow is technically transportation. It's made of straw, sort of. Mostly broken reeds, bits of thatch, and unidentifiable debris compressed into something vaguely mattress-shaped and deeply suspicious. You lie on it every night like someone trying to bond with a compost heap. The wood underneath isn't a proper frame but a warped plank, splintered at the edges, with a personality somewhere between barely functional and actively hostile. One of the legs is shorter than the others, so it rocks when you move. You don't move. You try to find a comfortable position, but comfort left this place centuries ago. The straw crackles and pokes through the coarse linen ticking, stabbing your back like tiny hay-fueled pitchforks. The stuffing has long since shifted into clumps that form geological strata. You sleep across a range of miniature hills, valleys, and sharp ridges that you've started naming out of spite. Mount Spine Crack, the hollow of sorrow, the ridge of sudden elbow bruises. Every night you wrestle with it like it's trying to win. Then there's the company. Not human, of course. There's no space for another person. And even if there were, that would invite a whole new category of horror. No, your bedmates are smaller, buzzer, itchier. Fleas are permanent residents. Generation after generation of tiny vampires living rent-free, feeding off you like you're the midnight buffet. They jump from straw to skin to hair and back again. Each bite a reminder that medieval hygiene is a fantasy best left to illuminated manuscripts. The lice are worse. They don't jump. They cling. They nest. They take your scalp and declare it their ancestral homeland. You scratch until your nails are blunt, until you draw blood, until the only thing left is the dull crawling sensation that whispers, "We are still here." At this point, you've stopped fighting them. You coexist like two kingdoms in uneasy truce. Sometimes you imagine them forming unions, holding elections, passing tiny laws. You don't blame them. You're warmer than the stone walls and slightly less aggressive than the castle cats. And speaking of warmth, there isn't any. The blanket is wool, coarse enough to exfoliate your soul. It was once white, maybe, but time and filth have turned it a mottled gray-brown, like a rain-soaked dog that's given up on life. It smells like smoke, sweat, mildew, and something vaguely cheese-adjacent. You curl into it anyway because the alternative is frostbite. On colder nights, you wake with your breath hanging in the air like a ghost that refuses to leave. Sometimes your hair freezes to the wall behind you. You don't ask why. You just chip it off and move on. There is no privacy. You sleep in a shared chamber, 12 people, one room, no partitions, and a collective agreement to pretend that nothing is happening. The walls don't muffle sound. They amplify it. Every snore ricochets off the stone like a siege horn. Someone coughs in the corner, a deep, wet rasp that promises plague. Another groans in their sleep. Someone else mutters a prayer or a curse or both. The man 2 beds down talks in his dreams. Sometimes in French, sometimes in Latin, always about fire. You haven't slept through the night in weeks. Light comes early. A narrow slit in the wall lets in just enough dawn to let you know you've survived another night. It drips cold along the edge of your bed, 1 drop every 5 seconds, landing on your forehead with military precision. You've placed a rag there to catch it, but the rag froze last week and now resembles a small haunted glacier. You roll to the other side only to find your foot submerged in something wet. Probably rain. Possibly worse. You used to dream of a feather bed. Not even a whole one, just a corner. Something soft, something dry. Now you dream of silence and skin that doesn't burn from scratching and waking up without another bite between your toes. Once, in the dead of night, you thought you heard a whisper from the mattress. Just the wind, you told yourself. Or maybe the straw shifting. But deep down, you knew the bed was alive. Not in a magical fairy tale way. In the fungal, insect-infested, you may be digesting while I sleep sort of way. Still, you lie back down. Because there's nowhere else to go. No other room. No guest chamber. No second blanket waiting by the fire. This is your bed. It bites. It crawls. It groans with you. But it's yours. And in this castle, that counts as luxury. Nature calls. But in a medieval castle, it doesn't knock politely. It shrieks through your lower intestines at precisely the wrong moment. Usually when it's freezing, dark, and everyone else is asleep or pretending to be. You shift under your crusty wool blanket and feel it build. A dull pressure that quickly evolves into a non-negotiable biological ultimatum. You delay as long as possible, hoping the sensation will just go away. It doesn't. It never does. There's no toilet, no seat, no privacy. Just the pot. The chamber pot sits in the corner, chipped, stained, and judging you. It's ceramic, which sounds elegant until you realize it's also cracked, freezing cold, and echoes like a cathedral when used. Every scrape, splash, and clank reverberates across the stone room with the subtlety of a battle drum. You glance around to see if anyone else is stirring, though there's no real waking in a room full of sleepless bodies marinating in stale air and shared regrets. You consider holding it in. You reconsider almost immediately. You shuffle over the floor with all the stealth of a limping cat dragging a wet towel. The pot is heavier than it should be, not because it's full, though it is, but because you can feel the weight of everyone else who's used it before you. You try not to breathe through your nose. You try not to breathe at all. The smell is less bad and more sentient. A warm bouquet of urine, sweat, and fermented shame. You squat awkwardly, praying your knees cooperate and your aim is true. Any misfire is a social disaster that lives with you forever, or at least until someone else makes a worse one. When you're done, you cover the pot with a cracked wooden lid, which does absolutely nothing except give you the illusion of dignity. The real horror begins now. Because in a castle, emptying the chamber pot isn't just a chore. It's a quest. You must carry it down dark hallways, past sleeping guards and scheming rats, to the garderobe chute, the castle's digestive system. And like all digestive systems, it's temperamental, unsightly, and occasionally backs up in dramatic fashion. The chute is a vertical shaft built into the outer wall, often located in a narrow stone stall jutting out precariously over open air. It's essentially a poop balcony. You slide the wooden door aside and brace yourself. Cold wind knifes through the opening, hitting you in places you wish had remained untouched. Below is the moat, black, stagnant, and always hungry. Some castles built seats over these shafts so you could do your business directly into the abyss. Yours did not. Yours gave you the pot and a vague suggestion to aim carefully. You tilt the pot slowly, cautiously, praying that the bottom doesn't give out or the wind doesn't blow it back in your face. There's no guarantee. You shout the traditional warning, garde l'eau, which is French for look out for the water, or more accurately, run for your life. Not that it matters. No one's listening. If anyone's below, they're either deaf, drunk, or about to have the worst surprise of their lives. The contents hit the moat with a sickening splatter that echoes off the stone like a slap from God. The smell, already awful, intensifies. You cough. The pot drips. You try not to look down because you know what's in that moat. Waste, yes, but also stories. Rats the size of cats. Disease floating like soup scum. And once, just once, you swear you saw a hand reaching up. You don't linger. You turn to go back, but now the pot is heavier with the weight of failure. You return it to its corner like a cursed artifact and slink back into bed, where the cold has claimed your spot and the fleas are waiting. There is no soap, no running water. You wipe your hands on the hem of your tunic and pretend that means something. You lie awake staring at the dark ceiling and wonder who designed this system. Who decided that pooping into pottery and hurling it into open air was the height of engineering? The answer, of course, is no one. The castle wasn't designed. It just happened. One stone at a time, one mistake at a time, until it became the grand, drafty, dysfunctional monster you live inside. You roll over, Careful not to kick the straw-stuffed mattress into another violent creak and close your eyes. You know what's waiting for you tomorrow. The pot will be there. So will the wind. So will the moat. You pray not for forgiveness or safety, but for solid footing. Because one slip on the edge of that garderobe, and you don't just lose your dignity. You fall into history. From a distance, the moat looks like security. A wide ring of water encircling the castle, gleaming under moonlight, tranquil as a mirror, and just as deceptive. Lords and ladies glance at it from tower windows and feel reassured. No one can cross that, they say, sipping weak wine and ignoring the smell wafting through the arrow slits. But the moat doesn't guard the castle. It haunts it. During the day, it shimmers faintly green. Not from algae, but from the thick layer of rot that floats on the surface like a soup of everything the castle doesn't want to deal with. Food scraps, dead rats, the occasional chicken, the very occasional human. It's a dumping ground for anything and everything unfit for polite company, which in a medieval castle is almost everything. Chamber pots are emptied into it. Latrine chutes spill directly above it. When it rains, the runoff carries and even more. Blood from the kitchens, slop from the stables, while from last night's bad pork. The water never moves fast enough to cleanse itself. It sits. It simmers. It stews. Sometimes it bubbles. The smell is not consistent. It's worse on warm days when the sun beats down and the moat releases its perfume in waves. A foul bouquet of rot, piss, and decaying dreams. But even on cold mornings, it lingers, rising like a ghost through the stones, curling beneath floorboards, sneaking into the servants' quarters before breakfast. You try not to breathe too deeply. You try to convince yourself that you're getting used to it. But nothing in the human soul adapts to that smell. It's not part of your world. It's part of something older, fouler, and less apologetic. Mosquitoes love it. They spawn in it by the millions, thriving in the warmth of rotting waste. They hover in dense clouds, breeding and feeding in equal measure. You wake up with your arms covered in welts. You scratch them open in your sleep. You don't remember the last time your legs weren't scabbed. Everyone in the castle has the same wounds, the same half-mad look in their eyes from the constant humming in their ears. You've watched grown men swat at shadows and blame the air for their rage. And then there are the eels. No one knows where they came from, but they're there, slick, black, and vaguely sentient. They dart through the filth with a kind of purpose that makes you uneasy. Once a boy fell in trying to retrieve a dropped dagger. By the time they pulled him out, he was covered in cuts and shaking from something he couldn't describe. He didn't speak for 3 days. When he did, he just said, "They were watching." You believe him. You're taught from your first week in the castle to never go near the edge alone. The stone lip around the moat is slick with moss, the kind that grows where nothing should grow, sticky and cold and alive. The footing is treacherous. One wrong step, one shove, one unlucky gust of wind, and you're down there. There's no ladder, no rope, no one diving in after you. You might scream. You might not. Either way, the moat takes what it wants. During sieges, the nobles brag that the moat is their first line of defense. Let them try to cross it, they say, grinning behind reinforced doors. Let them drown in it. But they forget. Attackers don't always drown. Sometimes they wade through. They wrap themselves in soaked cloaks to mask their scent, plug their noses with herbs, and crawl through the darkness, silent as fog. There are stories of soldiers climbing into castles through the latrine chutes, emerging from the moat like reborn beasts, covered in sludge, eyes wild, knives in their teeth. And no one hears them coming. You've seen it after storms. When the water level rises, it floods the lower walls. It pours into cellars, kitchens, storerooms. The moat comes inside. The castle absorbs it like a sponge. And for days afterward, everything smells like wet death. Even the firewood burns foul. Even the bread tastes like mildew. There's no escape from it. You eat it. You breathe it. You carry it on your boots from room to room. And eventually, you stop noticing the black streaks on the floor. But they're there, just like the moat. Just like the things that live in it. No one truly knows how deep it goes. There's no map, no survey, just layers of mud and bone and regret. It could be 6 feet deep. It could be 60. It doesn't matter. It's not a moat. It's a memory of everything the castle wants to forget. And it's always waiting. From a distance, the castle looks eternal, solid, imposing, an immovable monument of stone and sovereignty that looms over the hills like a granite god. People outside see its towers and battlements and think, strength, power, safety. But you live inside it. And inside, you know the truth. This place is falling apart. The walls were built in a time before anyone considered insulation or structural integrity. Each stone was laid with pride and prayer and very little mortar. On dry days, the cracks between them are merely decorative, tiny crooked lines like veins in old hands. But when the rain comes, those cracks weep. Water pours through the walls in long, deliberate streaks, soaking the tapestries and rotting the beams behind them. At first, you thought it was a leak. Then you realize the entire wall was the leak. Nothing stays dry. Your clothes are damp before you put them on. The bed sheets develop spots that feel slick and cold no matter how close you sleep to the hearth. Your boots squelch when you walk, even though you're still indoors. The air itself feels like it's trying to seep into your bones and wring you out from the inside. The ceilings don't fare better. The upper floors sag, timber beams groaning under the weight of soaked stone and rotten plaster. You hear creaks in the night, long, slow ones that make your skin crawl, and you wonder if the ceiling above you is considering its final descent. Once you watched an entire section of corridor collapse under a snow-heavy roof. It fell without warning, taking half a staircase and one unfortunate guard who had just stepped out to relieve himself. They pulled him out 4 hours later, coughing up splinters and screaming about the ceiling being alive. He wasn't wrong. You're never quite sure what's secure and what's decorative. Some of the towers are real. Others are just for show, crumbling cylinders patched with moss and hope. Walk the wrong hall, and you'll feel it shift beneath your feet. The stones rearrange themselves slightly, as if trying to remember how they were supposed to fit together. The floor dips in places that used to be flat. You learn to memorize the safe spots. Tiles that don't tilt. Planks that don't groan like they've seen too much. You once leaned against a column while tying your shoe. The base gave out. The top cracked. A single chunk of stone fell and shattered on the flagstones beside your foot. It was roughly the size of a human head. You didn't lean on anything after that. The drafts aren't whispers. They're accusations. Wind whistles through the gaps in the walls, winding down stairwells and across the floor in freezing gusts that carry the scent of rain, soot, and mildew. Some corridors howl like wolves when the wind is right. At night, it sounds like the dead trying to get back in. And in a place where half the walls are grave markers, you don't ask twice. Then there's the mold. It creeps quietly, like a second skin spreading across the interior stone. Black streaks in the corners. Green fuzz where the mortar has cracked. The servants pretend not to notice it. The nobles claim it adds character. You watch someone cough black one morning and never stop. He's in the infirmary now, which is just a different room with a bucket and less judgment. You've been in castles before that were worse. Ones held together by vines and desperation, where the walls leaned at angles that made architects weep. But this one is older, prouder, which means when it fails, it will do so catastrophically. A chunk of parapet fell last winter, cracking the courtyard like a warhammer. No one was standing there. Thank whatever gods were still willing to listen, but the dogs wouldn't go near that spot for weeks. And when the stewards sent a boy to clean it up, the ground caved in under him. Turns out the old wall hadn't been sealed properly. They pulled him out with 2 broken legs and a new fear of floors. You sleep near a wall that leans slightly to the left. It wasn't always like that, you think. But now every morning it seems a little closer, a little heavier, like it's tired of standing. Like one day it's going to give up and collapse into your cot, flattening you into a cautionary tale told by the cook during supper. The castle doesn't need enemies. It doesn't need siege engines, or battering rams, or torches and pitchforks. It is its own siege, and you're already inside the walls. The Great Hall tries to impress you, but it fails before you even sit down. It's a cavernous chamber filled with smoke and echoing noise, half lit by dying torches and the dull gray of a sunless morning. A pair of iron chandeliers hang above the long tables, swaying slightly with every gust of wind that slips in through the cracks. Their candles drip steadily onto the tables below, right into bowls of pottage that no one cares enough to move. Everything smells of wet dog, old ash, and the lingering shame of last night's feast, which wasn't really a feast, just louder chewing. You find a seat between a snoring guardsman and a scullion with one eye permanently squinted from a grease burn. The bench is sticky. You don't ask why. You've learned the value of ignorance when it comes to surfaces in this place. Your bowl is waiting for you, already half full of something gray and steaming. It's pottage again. Always pottage. Made from yesterday's leftovers, which were made from the day before's leftovers, and so on, spiraling back through time until you're eating a spoonful of history too bland to remember. You try not to taste it. You chew like someone trying to win a bet, forcing it down while mentally separating texture from flavor. Every few bites, you hit something unexpected. A lump, a twig, maybe a chunk of turnip that decided not to die gracefully. There might be meat in it, or a meat-adjacent substance, but the only way to be sure is to bite and listen for the crunch of bone. You eat fast, not because you're hungry, but because the longer it sits in your bowl, the more it cools and thickens into something that defies physics and possibly faith. Beside the bowl is a piece of bread. You tap it against the table first. Testing. It thuds like a rock. That's a good sign. It means it hasn't gone moldy yet, just stale enough to chip enamel. You tear off a corner, soak it in the pottage to soften it, and gnaw carefully, counting your teeth before and after each bite. The man across from you isn't as cautious. He bites down hard and swears loudly, spitting a shard of molar onto the floor with impressive precision. No one reacts. The floor eats teeth like candy. The beer arrives in shared pitchers, warm, flat, and slightly sour. It's the only drink that doesn't taste worse as the day goes on, which is why everyone drinks it at dawn without shame. You pour a mug for yourself and sip, pretending it's refreshing. It isn't. It's barely beer, but it's wet and doesn't smell like the moat, so it passes for potable. Water is a luxury too dangerous to trust. You learn that after your third stomach infection and a week of prayers whispered between bouts of violent regret. The nobles don't eat here. They dine upstairs where the fires are hotter, the bread is softer, and the servants bring their food in on trays without rat bites. Down here, you serve yourself. The kitchen dumps food in bulk, and everyone scrambles to grab a bowl before the flies do. You elbow a boy trying to steal your spot. He glares but backs off. It's not worth bleeding over a turnip, but people have bled for less. The air grows thicker as more bodies pour in. Smoke from the hearth mixes with the collective breath of 50 unwashed mouths, and soon the room is a stew of body odor and disappointment. Somewhere, a lute starts playing out of tune. No one asks for music. The sound echoes between the stone walls, scraping across your nerves like a wooden spoon on an empty pot. The only thing worse than the music is the conversation. Loud, crude, and repetitive. Someone's bragging about a boil they lanced last night. Someone else is arguing about whose shift it is to clean the garderobe chute. You pretend to be deaf. As the meal drags on, you feel the room settle into its rhythm. Bowls scrape. Teeth grind. Mugs clink. No one smiles. Breakfast here isn't a time of peace or renewal. It's an obligation, a necessary ordeal to fuel the suffering that lies ahead. You eat so you can work. You work so you can eat. And at the end of the day, you start over. The great hall swallows the noise and keeps it. Everything in this castle echoes. Footsteps, screams, laughter, even your hunger. By the time you finish your meal, you're hungrier than when you started. You stare into your empty bowl and wonder how something can fill your stomach and still leave you so hollow. You rise from the bench with aching knees, step around a puddle of something you hope was ale, and walk toward the door. Behind you, the hall continues to breathe, slow, smoky, and indifferent. It's 6 in the morning, and the day has already won. You step into the kitchen and immediately regret it. The air is thick with smoke, sweat, and the sharp tang of something burning. Always something burning. Heat radiates from every surface like the stones themselves have caught fire. The hearth dominates the far wall, a roaring red-mouthed monster that never sleeps, fed constantly by wood, fat, and bad decisions. It crackles hungrily, throwing sparks onto the soot-blackened floor while a line of wide copper pots bubble and spit along its edge. If you listen closely, you can hear the hiss of skin meeting steam. Sometimes meat, sometimes not. The floor is slick. Grease, blood, and yesterday's broth form a kind of medieval slip-and-slide across the uneven flagstones. You walk carefully, not out of fear, but because you saw what happened to the last boy who rushed through here. One foot went out from under him, and he landed chin first beside the boiling cauldron. He didn't cry, just lay there stunned. blinking at the ceiling while a ladle of sauce continued to drip onto his back. No one helped him up. Everyone was too busy. There's no room to breathe. Cooks yell over each other in a symphony of chaos, knives flashing in the half-light, elbows flying, pans clattering, orders barked. A dog yelps and scurries out, tail between its legs, trailing something that looks suspiciously like a rabbit's head. There are too many people in too small a space, all dancing a lethal waltz around open flames and vats of bubbling oil. Everyone moves quickly and badly. You don't make eye contact unless you're prepared to be given a task, insulted, or stabbed with a spoon. Above you, the rafters drip fat. No one knows how long the grease has been accumulating up there, but every now and then it lets go with a slow, viscous drop that lands with a sizzle on hot metal or bare skin. There's a black scorch mark on one beam from where the ceiling caught fire 2 winters ago. They never repaired it, just shrugged, threw another log on the hearth, and kept stirring the soup. You pass a table where a pig's head stares at you, eyes milky, mouth agape, its tongue lolling out over the edge like it's trying to escape. The butcher behind it is sharpening a cleaver with rhythmic strokes, singing under his breath in a language you don't recognize. He grins at you with red-stained teeth. You don't grin back. Over by the ovens, a scullery maid is scrubbing a pan the size of a coffin, bent at the waist with a rag that's more whole than cloth. Her hands are red and cracked, nails black with soot. She doesn't look up when you approach, doesn't stop scrubbing, even when a pot of boiling stew is dragged past her foot close enough to scald. Everyone here has gone a little numb to pain. It's a survival mechanism. You adapt or you blister. The kitchen is never clean. It's too alive for that. Flour coats every surface in a thin, ghostly sheen. Onion skins gather in corners like snowdrifts. Chicken feathers float in the air, landing on bread, soup, people. It doesn't matter. The fire doesn't care what it cooks, and neither do the pots. They hiss at everything the same. One wrong step, and you don't just burn, you disappear. Once a boy dropped a rag into the stew pot and leaned in to fish it out. The cook yanked him back by the collar just in time, but not before the skin on his forearm peeled like parchment. The smell is a full-body experience. Roast meat, scorched sugar, garlic, ale, burned hair. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your dreams. You walk out of the kitchen and people know where you've been. They wrinkle their noses and step back. Even the dogs hesitate. You're here to collect something, bread, maybe, or a tray of scraps for the guard tower. But no one helps you. You hover near the corner like a ghost with purpose, waiting for someone to notice, dreading the moment they do. The head cook eventually turns, eyes narrowing as he points a greasy ladle in your direction and mutters something that might be your name. You take the tray and back away like it's cursed, which it might be. You don't look at what's on it. As you leave, you nearly collide with a boy carrying a spit-roasted goose twice his size. He stumbles, rights himself, keeps moving. Behind him, the fire pops loudly, flinging a spark into the air where it hovers, winks, then disappears. For a moment, you wonder if that's what the kitchen is. A place where things go to disappear. Food, names, memories, skin, and sometimes people. You live where light doesn't go. Beneath the floorboards, beneath the stairs, beneath everything that matters. Your bed is a pile of burlap sacks stuffed with straw that smells like it was harvested from a stable floor, wedged between a stack of firewood and a wall that weeps when it rains. The ceiling is so low you can't sit upright. When you lie down, your feet stick out. And when you curl up, your knees ache. You've memorized the patterns in the wood beams above, cracks, knots, the dark streaks where someone's candle caught the boards once and no one ever cleaned it up. You stare at those streaks at night and wonder if they're from soot or something worse. The space is shared, of course. Privacy is a myth, like clean water or mercy. You sleep beside 3 others. One snores, one talks in her sleep, and one grinds his teeth so loudly you've considered smothering him just to restore some quiet. The air is thick with breath and damp wool. Your blanket is communal. So is the smell. And when it rains, the stone floor seeps cold through your ribs like the castle itself is trying to drink you dry. You're not on the payroll. You're not paid. You work. You eat. You sleep. That's the arrangement. You belong to the castle, like the buckets or the broomsticks. Replaceable and rarely missed. Your tasks are endless. Scrub the floors. Haul the water. Stoke the fires. Shovel ash. Clean up after the horses, the dogs, the cooks, The nobles' dogs. You are a human buffer between them and the consequences of their own filth. If something spills, you clean it. If something breaks, you fetch another. If something rots, you carry it out. You don't speak unless spoken to. And when spoken to, you apologize, even if the thing that happened wasn't your fault. Especially then. Meals are what's left after everyone else has eaten. You hover near the kitchen door like a stray and wait for the cook to toss bones and crusts into a wooden basin you pretend is a dish. Sometimes there's gristle. Once you found half an onion and nearly wept. Most days it's bread so hard it could double as a weapon, or watery stew flavored mostly with regret. The salt pork is salt and not much else. You chew slowly, not because it tastes good, but because you know it has to last. Water is drawn from a well that smells like old pennies and deeper things. If you're lucky, the rain barrels are full and haven't been tainted by pigeon droppings or a careless rat drowning. You drink from the side where the green foam is thinner and pray your stomach is in a forgiving mood. Washing is a privilege. You steal moments to rinse your hands or dab your face, but full-body cleaning only happens when it storms hard enough to justify standing naked under a gutter. And even then, you keep your shift on. You never know who's watching. Clothes are handed down again, then patched, then cut into rags. Your tunic has more stitches than thread. Your boots, if you have them, are 2 sizes too big and permanently wet. You stuff them with straw to keep the leather from collapsing. The soles flap like broken tongues when you walk, but you walk anyway because there's always somewhere to go and never enough time to get there. The nobles don't see you. Not really. They speak past you, through you, around you. You are the hands that pour the wine, the feet that run to fetch the cloak, the back that lifts the chest without being asked. If they notice you at all, it's to complain that your sleeves are wrinkled or your hair looks unwashed. You bow. You nod. You agree. You learn to say thank you when they forget to hit you. At night, if you're allowed to sleep, you collapse into the straw like something dropped. You don't dream anymore. Or if you do, you don't remember. Your body forgets how to rest, even when it isn't moving. The muscles twitch, the feet ache, the mind hums like a beehive full of unfinished chores. And when the rooster crows before the sky has even decided on a color, you're already up, already moving, already back in it. You're not a noble. You're the floor beneath their feet. And the castle never stops walking. The castle is alive, but not in the noble, poetic way the scribes like to write about. It breathes, yes, but it breathes mold. It moves, yes, but only because the walls are shifting and the floorboards are swollen from constant damp. And it hums with activity, but not the kind you'd want to brag about. You share this place with life. Life that scurries, skitters, furs, burrows, and bites. Life that wakes you before dawn and stays long after you're dead. The rats come first. You hear them at night, always at night, chewing in the walls, squeaking in the beams, thumping behind the tapestries as if they're trying to dig a tunnel straight to your skull. They travel in gangs, thick, gray, and confident, their fur slick with filth and eyes bright with the certainty of creatures that know you'll never catch them. You've seen one steal half a loaf of bread right off the Lord's table, then drag it beneath the throne like it paid rent. No one bothered to chase it. They just made the sign of the cross and kept chewing their own bread faster. In the granary, they rule outright. The sacks are punctured, the grain full of holes, the floor a mess of husks and droppings. You're told to sweep it up and say nothing. Weevils build character. The steward jokes, then grabs a handful of barley for the stew. You pretend not to see the wriggling. Later, as you eat, you chew carefully, wondering if what you're biting is a bit of herb or something else entirely. Roaches, those dark little devils, are everywhere else. Under pans, between bricks, crawling up the walls like they're heading to confession. You find them in your boots. You find them in your bed. Once you found one in your ear. It was dead, but that didn't help much. They're impossible to kill, harder to track, and seem to multiply with every shout, stomp, or prayer. The kitchen has a whole colony living behind the bread oven, and the cook swears they're resistant to heat, flour, and curses. The castle doesn't just host pests. It hosts decay. Everywhere you look, something is rotting. Food, cloth, wood, morals. The beams above the main hall drip black from age and neglect. The stairs creak not from footsteps, but from the slow softening of ancient planks turning to mulch. You can't lean against the walls without getting dust and fungus on your sleeves. Tapestries hang limp with mildew. Their once proud colors faded to shades of ash and regret. No one cleans them anymore. No one remembers what they were meant to show. Your nose adapts before your eyes do. There's a smell to it all, a damp, earthy stench that seeps out of every crack and corner. A mix of old meat, standing water, wet wool, and mouse urine. It clings to your skin like another layer of clothing. You walk through it, breathe it in, wear it until it becomes you. Sometimes the rot isn't hidden. Sometimes it's bold. Green blooms on bread, black fuzz on meat, orange slicks in barrels that should only hold water. When it's your turn to serve food, you scrape off the top layer and hope the rest hasn't turned. When you eat, you try not to look too closely. You've learned that hunger is more persuasive than caution, and that your stomach can forget what your eyes refuse to. You've also learned to watch for the fleas. They're smaller than the rats, subtler than the roaches, but worse in the long run. They hop from one host to another, biting and burrowing, nesting in hair, fur, clothing, hope. Everyone has them. You scratch in your sleep. You scratch while serving. Sometimes you see a noble do the same, absently behind the ear with a smile that says they're pretending it's not happening. But it is. And then there's the fear. Not the fear of rodents or bugs or spoiled food. The deeper fear. The one that settles in your chest when you hear of another cough in the next hall. When someone goes to bed with a headache and wakes up dead. When a kitchen boy turns blue behind the ears. When the steward starts boiling vinegar in every corner and the priests suddenly stop laughing. The castle knows this fear. It has seen it before. The plague has a smell, they say, like wet coins and roses. You've smelled both here. And sometimes you wonder if you're already breathing it in. If the rot isn't just in the walls, but in your blood. You wake in the night with sweat on your back and your heart in your throat. And you listen to the rats, to the skittering, to the sound of the castle dying a little more each day. And you wonder if you're just another pest in its system, soon to be swallowed, chewed, and forgotten. The fire is supposed to help. That's the idea. A hearth in every hall, flames licking gently at stacked logs, casting warmth and golden light across cold stone. It sounds cozy in theory, something from a story, from a painting, from a world where fire behaves. But here, in this castle, fire doesn't warm. It mocks. It smokes. It chokes. And it reminds you just how cold the rest of your life is. You crouch near the hearth like a beggar, hands outstretched, hoping for some flicker of heat to reach your bones. The flames dance, but it's all show. Heat seeps out in faint pulses, barely enough to dry the edge of your sleeves before the wind finds its way through a draft in the wall and undoes the work. You shift closer, too close, until the hairs on your arms start to curl. You shouldn't have to choose between frostbite and singeing your tunic. But in this place, you always choose something. The smoke starts early, and it doesn't stop. The chimney was built long before anyone understood how chimneys should work. The flue is crooked, the passage clogged with a decade of soot and nests and possibly a very unlucky pigeon. So the smoke has nowhere to go. It rolls out into the room like a second fog, thick and low and clinging to the floor. It bites at your eyes, stings your throat, settles into your lungs like it's moving in for winter. You cough, and so does everyone else. It becomes a shared rhythm. Breath, cough, blink, cough, curse. Some people try to fix it. They poke at the fire with long iron rods, shift the logs, open the door to let the smoke escape. But all that does is let the cold in faster. Others drape wet cloths across their mouths and pretend it helps. You sit in it. You breathe through it. You start to believe that warmth is a myth and that suffering is the true purpose of fire. The nobles complain too, but their hearths are bigger, their rooms better sealed, their clothes thicker. When the smoke gets bad, they simply leave. You stay. You always stay, because the fire is the only chance you have of feeling something other than the dull ache of cold in your joints. Your toes are numb. Your fingers ache when you flex them. You've slept under 4 blankets and still woken with your teeth chattering hard enough to rattle your thoughts loose. Sometimes the fire dies in the night. The wind howls through the cracks in the window slits, and the flames gutter down to embers no one can reignite. You huddle with others for body heat, which works in theory, but rarely in practice. Everyone's just as cold as you. All you get is the sensation of someone else's shivering pressed against your back. You lie awake in the dark, breathing out frost, listening to the walls creak, and wondering if your insides will freeze before morning. There are burns, too. People don't talk about them much, but they happen. A boy tripped once carrying kindling and landed hand-first in the ashes. Blistered for days. Fevered. Delirious. The skin came off in ribbons. The cook dropped a pan, and the oil burst into flame. Her sleeve caught. She smothered it with a towel, but not before the smell of scorched wool and flesh filled the entire kitchen. She didn't scream, just stood there blinking, smoke rising from her wrist. Fire is supposed to be a comfort. Here, it's just another danger with good intentions. The stones around the hearth are black with centuries of smoke, carved with old initials and claw marks where someone tried to brace themselves too close. You see the stories there. Every burn, every cold night, every failed attempt to make this place feel less like a tomb. And still the fires are lit. Every morning someone brings the wood, pokes the embers, and tries again. Because there's nothing else to do. You've stopped expecting the fire to fix anything. You don't sit by it for warmth anymore. You sit by it because that's what people do. Because you've been taught that fire is hope, even if you no longer believe in it. Even if it makes you cough until your ribs hurt. Even if it lights up your face while the rest of your body freezes. The fire is here. It crackles and hisses and fills the room with the scent of smoke and memory. But it never warms you. Not really. Your clothes lie in a heap by the cot, steaming faintly in the morning chill. They didn't dry overnight. They never do. You shake them out, and a cloud of dust and regret puffs into the air. There's a wet spot near the hem that hasn't fully dried since last spring. You sniff cautiously, then immediately wish you hadn't. The smell is a combination of sweat, mold, and something you stopped trying to identify weeks ago. You hold your breath and start dressing anyway. The tunic is wool, thick and scratchy, with a texture like damp moss rubbed against sandpaper. It was once beige or brown or some earthy color with a name no one remembers. Now it's a shifting palette of stains. Grease from the kitchens, soot from the hearths, blood from your own cracked knuckles. The sleeves are uneven because one got scorched in the fire last month and had to be hacked shorter with a blunt knife. You slide it over your head like you're climbing inside a burlap sack that's trying to reject you. It clings immediately, damp from yesterday's sweat, colder than the stone floor, and alive with movement you can't quite see. The lice stir as you move. Tiny invisible soldiers marching through the seams and creases, biting as they go. You feel them along your back, beneath your collar, behind your knees. You scratch because you have to. Not scratching makes it worse. Scratching doesn't help either, but it's all you've got. The undergarments are no better, just a long sagging shift that used to be white and now matches the floor. Holes in places that shouldn't have holes. The waistband is a frayed cord you tie tight enough to stay up, but loose enough not to leave a mark. It doesn't matter how you tie it. It will come undone anyway, usually at the worst possible moment, like when you're bending to lift a bucket or trying to outrun a goat in the courtyard. Your hose are mismatched. One has a knee patched with a square of linen that doesn't stretch, so every step feels like your leg is arguing with itself. The other is thin at the heel, worn nearly to nothing. You step carefully when you walk because any sudden move could leave you barefoot and bleeding on the cold stone. You haven't owned socks in years. You once stuffed straw into the toes for warmth, but the mice found it and built a nest. You left them alone. They looked happier than you. The outer cloak is heavy and smells like old cheese. You don't know why. No one knows why. It just does. It's stiff in the places where rainwater mixed with filth and dried into rigid ridges that now poke at your shoulders like a scolding finger. When you pull it on, it creaks. The hood sags. It never sits right, but it keeps out the worst of the wind, and that's all that matters. No one washes anything. There's no soap, no time, no point. Washing your clothes would mean taking them off for long enough to scrub them. And then what would you wear while they dried? Nothing. You'd freeze. Or worse, you'd catch someone's attention. Better to stay clothed and stinking. You've gotten used to the smell. Everyone has. When everyone smells like decay, you stop noticing. Sometimes you hang your tunic over the fire to kill the lice. It works in theory. In practice, you just end up with crispy edges and singed armpits. Once someone tried boiling their garments in the cauldron used for porridge. The lice died, but so did the taste of breakfast for the next 3 days. That person was not asked to help again. You think about new clothes the way some people think about heaven. Something soft, something warm, something clean. But new clothes cost money, and money doesn't visit the servants' quarters unless it's been dropped by accident. You dream of linen that hasn't been pre-chewed by moths, of shoes with soles, of a cloak that doesn't smell like livestock. But dreams are expensive, and wool is eternal. So you wrap yourself in the same lice-infested, damp, smothering layers as yesterday, and the day before that, and every day before that. You tug at the collar, scratch behind your ear, and pray that nothing lays eggs. Then you walk out into the corridor, dressed for another day in the castle, ready for work, ready for war, ready for disease. Fleas don't care who you are. They don't stop to admire your title, your tapestry, your lineage carved into the stained glass above the chapel. They bite through silk and wool the same way they bite through rags. It doesn't matter if you sleep in a feather mattress or a pile of straw. If you bathe once a week or once a year. If you breathe, you bleed. And if you bleed, the fleas are coming. You wake up scratching, not because you want to, but because you have to. The bites form a constellation across your arms and legs, small and angry, arranged in patterns you've started to recognize. They bloom along the curve of your ankle, behind your knees, across the soft skin of your stomach. You claw at them in the dark, half asleep, nails blunt from overuse. You don't even open your eyes anymore. The itching is part of you now, like your name, like your shadow. You once thought fleas were a servant's problem, a peasant thing, something that came with mud and filth and sleeping too close to animals. But you've seen the noble scratch too. You've watched a baron's daughter discreetly run her fingernails along the back of her neck during supper. You've seen the lord of the keep pause mid-sentence to scratch behind his knee and pretend it never happened. They do it like a reflex, like breathing, like guilt. Everyone itches. Everyone lies about it. Bed bugs are worse, but quieter. They wait until the candles are out, until the air turns still and the stone starts to cool. Then they emerge from seams, from splinters, from inside the stuffing of mattresses older than memory. You don't see them, but you feel them. Small pressure, warm bite, faint crawl. You throw back the blankets and find nothing. But they're there, always there. You've woken with welts down your spine like tally marks. You've scratched holes in your tunic. You've bled into your sheets. And you're one of the lucky ones. Some people swell from the bites. Their skin puffs up red and tender and wet with infection. Boils rise like warnings. A stable boy once scratched his calf until it split open. By the next day, the leg was twice its normal size, and he was babbling about the Virgin Mary visiting him in a dream. They buried him before the swelling stopped. The fleas didn't wait. They just moved on. You've tried everything to stop them. Soap, vinegar, salt, boiling your bedding in a stolen pot. You've picked through your seams with a pin, turned your cloak inside out, burned the hay in your mattress. It works for a day, maybe two. Then the itching returns stronger, like it missed you. You've learned to stop fighting. You make peace with it. The constant bite becomes a rhythm. You scratch one arm, then the other, then your neck, then your side, then again. A slow, circular ritual like prayer. The castle helps them. Every room has the perfect conditions: warmth, moisture, fabric, flesh. The walls are alive with cracks and crevices. The floors are coated in skin flakes and old crumbs. The fires lure them closer. The furs hide them. You share the castle with them the way you share it with rats and roaches and ghosts. They were here before you. They'll be here after. No one talks about it. There's an unspoken agreement that parasites don't exist. If you don't say their name, they don't exist. You discuss the weather, the taxes, the quality of last night's ale, but never the itching, never the blood on your sheets or the twitch in your eye when something brushes your ankle. Even when you're raw from scratching, even when your skin feels like it's crawling without reason, you keep quiet. To speak of it is to admit defeat, but you see it in the eyes, in the way people shift in their seats, tug at their sleeves, rub their ankles together beneath the table. You see it in the way the maids slap their thighs while walking, or the guards scratch beneath their armor when they think no one's watching. Even the priest has a twitch in his hand when he blesses the bread. Fleas don't believe in God or rank or mercy. They just want your blood, and they always get it. You take the stairs like you're stepping through a dream, carefully, without trusting any of it. The stone steps are smooth in all the wrong places, polished not by care, but by centuries of boots, blood, and broken ankles. They sag in the middle and flare at the edges, like they're trying to slip out from beneath you. Some are cracked straight through, split like old teeth. One of them, near the west tower, is entirely hollow underneath. Step too hard, and it shifts, groaning like it remembers the last person who fell through. And someone always falls through. The walls don't help. They lean where they shouldn't. The castle settles constantly, tilting like it's drunk and trying to pretend otherwise. One hallway slopes so sharply that carts have to be braced with bricks to stop them from rolling into the scullery. You walk at an angle there, bracing yourself against the damp stone, one hand out, pretending it's normal. Everything here is tilted. You learn to adjust. Some corridors just stop. You turn a corner expecting a door, a staircase, anything, and instead find yourself face to face with a wall of stone, hastily mortared and faintly sweating. It's as if the castle changed its mind halfway through building itself. One hallway near the armory leads into what looks like a closet, then narrows suddenly into a jagged crawl space that breathes cold air and smells like rust and regret. You went in once. You came out with a nosebleed and a new understanding of why people pray before entering unfamiliar rooms. The upper levels are worse. Wooden floors warped from years of rain and rot bow inward like a dying lung. Boards creak with every step, some of them snapping like twigs beneath your weight. You test each one with your toes, searching for that subtle give, the warning shudder that tells you this might be the end of your spine. Even when you know it's coming, it surprises you. One moment you're walking, the next your leg is swallowed to the knee and you're screaming into the dark, hoping someone hears. No one hears, because sound gets lost here. The halls twist too much. They curve where they should run straight, taper off into shadows, double back like they're ashamed of themselves. You've taken the same wrong turn twice in one day, ending up in the same torchlit dead end, staring at the same faded tapestry of a man stabbing a dragon that looks vaguely embarrassed. There are rumors of servants who vanished mid-shift, trays still in hand, swallowed by the maze. They say you can still hear the clatter of plates in certain hallways long after everyone's gone to bed. Doors don't always open, and when they do, sometimes they open into places you don't expect. An unfinished stairwell, a hole in the floor, a wall that's mostly termites. The locks are old, the hinges older. You push too hard, and the whole thing might come off in your hands, dragging stone and splinters with it. Or it won't budge at all, trapping you in a narrow room with no windows and the distinct smell of someone else's panic. The towers try to kill you outright. Narrow spiral staircases twist tightly, steps no wider than your foot, no railing, no mercy. If you slip, and everyone slips, you tumble like a sack of meat through cold air and centuries of silence. The guard who fell last winter hit every step on the way down. They say his spine snapped in 3 places. They say he lived, but you haven't seen him since. Even the ceilings want you dead. Chunks of plaster fall without warning. A stone block dropped from the keep last month, right into the chapel hallway, narrowly missing a novice on her way to morning prayers. She took it as a sign. She left that night and never came back. No one blamed her. You walk carefully now. You memorize the good steps, the safe corners, the beams that haven't cracked, the doors that still open. You count paces between hazards. You hold your breath in certain halls, not because of the smell, but because you're afraid it's the last one you'll get to take. The castle wasn't built to last. It was built to confuse, to bend, to lean just enough to remind you who's really in control. And every time you take a walk, it reminds you, this isn't a home. It's a trap with stairs. At first glance, the banquet seems like a miracle. Long tables draped in faded cloth stretch across the hall, sagging under the weight of roasted meats, glistening fruit, and tarnished goblets sloshing with ale. The air is thick with heat, smoke, perfume, and something sharper, something underneath it all that you pretend not to smell. Torches flicker along the walls, casting warped shadows on ancient stone and catching the sheen of grease clinging to every surface. Laughter rings out, hollow and forced, bouncing off the ceiling and into your ears like bad news dressed in velvet. The meat arrives on silver trays, but the silver is cracked and the meat is sweating. It's a suckling pig tonight, its snout charred, its mouth stuffed with a wilted apple that's gone soft and gray around the edges. You watch as the steward slices into it with a blade that hasn't been cleaned since last Tuesday. The juice that runs out is too dark, the smell too sweet. You look away and hope your stomach still believes in hope. You're seated near the end, of course, among the lesser folk, The kind whose names don't carry weight, only debts. The bread is hard, the cheese is sweating, and the wine tastes faintly of vinegar and mold. You eat it anyway, because not eating means drawing attention, and drawing attention means answering questions. You don't want to talk about the boil on your back or the rash spreading across your chest. You don't want to explain why your hands shake when you pour your drink. You want to get through the meal without being noticed, without vomiting, and without catching fire. The nobles don't eat like you. They tear meat with jewel-stained fingers and shout across the table with mouths half full. They argue over borders they've never seen and cousins they only remember by their scandals. One lord insists his nephew didn't start the rebellion in the north. It was clearly provoked by an insult involving sheep and a poorly timed poem. Another swears he lost his lands due to sorcery, not gambling. They slam goblets, demand refills, and hurl bones onto the floor with the glee of men who've never had to sweep anything in their lives. Spices coat everything. Cinnamon, cloves, pepper, so thick it burns your throat and makes your eyes water. Not to impress, not to taste, but to hide. The meat is too old, the broth too thin, the fish too far from the sea. The cooks drown the food in spice to silence the truth of it, to make you forget the greenish tinge on the chicken or the stringy texture of what might be horse. You chew carefully and try not to bite into anything that pushes back. By the third course, someone has already passed out. His face is red, his tunic damp with sweat, a smear of something dark trailing down his chin. No one helps him. The man beside him reaches over and takes his leg of mutton, muttering about waste. A servant arrives a minute later and drags the body out by the ankles, leaving behind a trail that no one will clean until morning. You sip from your goblet and feel your stomach shift. Something inside you does not agree with the swan stew. You breathe through your nose and pray it was just a cramp. But deep down you know the signs. You've seen the look on faces before they run to the latrine. You've heard the sounds, felt the heat and the sweat that comes next. You eat slower now, picking at the crust of a pie that leaks a dark liquid onto the plate like it's bleeding out its regrets. The music doesn't help. A trio of minstrels near the dais plays something that was probably cheerful once, but now sounds like a dirge played by drunkards. They hit the wrong notes with conviction, and the nobles cheer as if they can't tell the difference. One begins singing about a maiden and a miller, but forgets the words halfway through and makes up the ending. It involves a bear. The room erupts in laughter, not because it's funny, but because everyone's too full to argue. Toward the end, a noble woman screams at her husband over a misremembered vow made 2 winters ago during a hunt that ended in disaster. He throws a goblet. It misses and hits the cook. No one apologizes. Another steward collapses into the soup. A priest begins praying for digestion. You nod politely and excuse yourself, barely reaching the corridor before your body decides it's had enough. You leave behind a hall full of noise, perfume, firelight, and filth. You stagger toward the privy, clutching your stomach and swearing under your breath. The feast was grand, and you will be regretting it for days. The Great Hall was never built for peace. It was built to impress, to intimidate, to echo. And echo it does. Every laugh, every toast, every insult and threat stretched thin across the stone, bouncing back like a warning. You walk in quietly and take your place near the wall, not to observe the grandeur, but to avoid the line of fire. No one sits in the center unless they're powerful, foolish, or new. And the new don't stay new for long. There's a sword hanging over the hearth. It's decorative, they say, part of the family's history. But it's real enough, sharp enough, and it's been used more than once to settle an argument before the wine even reaches the bottom of the goblet. You've seen it happen. One man insulted another's sister. Or maybe it was his dog. Either way, within seconds there was blood on the flagstones and a stunned silence that lasted just long enough for someone to whisper, finally, before the minstrels picked up their instruments again. Fighting happens often, almost ritually. It starts as a joke, a drunken elbow, a jibe about lineage, a misstep in a dance. But things escalate quickly when everyone's carrying knives. There's no such thing as a light push in the Great Hall. Every shove is a declaration. Every stumble could be a duel. And every duel could end with someone face down in the gravy. You've watched men pull daggers from their boots while still chewing meat. You've seen women throw goblets so hard they cracked a skull. No one intervenes, not unless the wrong person starts to lose. The banners above you hang heavy with dust, embroidered with lions and hawks, and other symbols of families that used to matter more. Now they just watch, silent witnesses to another noble vomiting onto the rushes while someone else screams about inheritance. The rushes themselves do nothing to hide the blood. They soak it up, sure, but the smell lingers. You step carefully around a dark patch near the hearth and try not to remember who bled there last week. Sometimes the violence isn't loud. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence, of glances exchanged like knives, of a goblet passed a little too quickly. Poison is a quieter art, but no less effective. A lord clutches his stomach and turns pale halfway through the roast duck, and everyone keeps eating. A lady excuses herself and never returns. Her maid finds her stiff in bed the next morning, eyes wide, mouth foaming. And the only question anyone asks is whether there's still pie left from supper. You learn to drink from the cup you poured yourself. You learn to eat only what you saw prepared. And even then, you smell it first. You nod at everyone. You agree with everything. You become fluent in flattery and invisible in disagreement. It's survival. You don't win arguments in the Great Hall. You survive them. And if you're lucky, you remember where the exits are. There are guards in the corners, of course, but they're decorative too. They don't stop anything. They wait for orders. And by the time orders come, it's usually just to drag the body out and throw a new rug over the stain. Sometimes the guards are the ones fighting. One broke a serving boy's nose for tripping near the high table. No one said a word. The boy cleaned up his own blood and apologized for bleeding too loudly. After dessert, the bodies are usually gone. You hear the scrape of boots, the grunt of someone pulling dead weight across stone, and the thud of a door closing. You don't look. You never look. You keep eating. The stew has cooled. The bread has hardened. The candles have burned low. Someone makes a joke about the dead man's manners. Someone else laughs too hard, too loud, too fast. Everyone pretends it was funny. You leave when the others leave, slowly, carefully, with the kind of grace that says, I am not a threat. I am not worth stabbing tonight. You slip out beneath the faded banners, past the hearth with its sword still clean, past the minstrels playing a song no one hears. The night air hits your face like a confession. You breathe it in and wonder how many people will still be breathing by morning. In the castle's heart, violence is tradition, and tradition always finds its voice. You learn quickly that smiles mean nothing here. They flash across the great hall like blades in sunlight, sharp, fleeting, and dangerous. Everyone wears one, just as everyone wears a blade. Some carry them on their hips, others in their boots. But the most dangerous are the ones hidden in sleeves, in words, in glances that last half a second too long. You sleep near these people. You eat beside them. You nod politely and pray they found a better target today. The nobles don't shout, not when they're angry. That would be too easy to spot, too honest. Instead, they compliment you. They pull you into quiet conversations near hearths and staircases, hands warm on your elbow, breath thick with wine and lies. I heard something, they say. I thought you should know. And then they tell you a secret you never wanted. Someone's affair, someone's debt, someone's bastard child hidden behind the chapel. They whisper it like a gift, but it weighs like a stone. You can't unhear it. That's the trick. They want you to know, not to help you, but to trap you. Now you're part of it. Now you know too much. If you stay silent, you're complicit. If you repeat it, you're a threat. Every word is a loaded dice, and no one tells you the game until you've already rolled. Servants vanish sometimes. So do lesser knights. One day they're pouring wine, sweeping rushes, darning sleeves. The next they're gone. Sent home, someone says. Promoted, another adds. But no one ever says the word. Not aloud. You only find out the truth when you notice their boots still under the cot, or when their cousin weeps too loudly in the stables. The rumor spreads quickly. They said the wrong thing. They offended the wrong heir. They laughed when they should have bowed. No one has to prove anything. Accusation is enough. A lady once claimed her maid insulted her virtue. She said it lightly, mid-conversation, with a soft laugh and a sip of cider. By nightfall, the maid had been whipped and locked away. No hearing, no defense, no chance. All it took was one noble's word against another's silence. The others nodded, murmured how sad it was, and changed the subject. The next morning, someone else was brushing the lady's hair. You understand now why people speak so carefully. Every sentence is rehearsed. Every compliment loaded with conditions. You look radiant today means I know what you did last night. What a clever thing to say means say more so I can use it. Even silence can be suspicious. You must respond, but not too eagerly. You must agree, but not without pause. You must always seem useful, but never indispensable. There are letters too, folded notes passed between gloved hands, sealed with wax, perfumed and precise. You don't read them. You don't even look at them. But you know what they are. A whisper in ink. A threat written sideways. A promise of ruin behind a ribbon. Some people receive more than others. Some write with shaking hands. Some burn them before the ink dries. Loyalty here is a currency, and it depreciates quickly. You can be trusted one day and suspected the next, depending on who benefits from your downfall. You've seen friends turn on each other with practiced ease. You've watched siblings accuse one another across a breakfast table, smiling through mouthfuls of boiled eggs. No one flinches. No one stops chewing. You keep your head down. You nod often. You agree with everything, even when you're not sure what was said. You laugh when others laugh. You share your wine and hide your thoughts. At night, you sleep lightly, fully clothed, with your boots on and your back to the wall. You wake at every creak of floorboards, every rustle of fabric, every cough that doesn't sound quite right. Because here, trust isn't earned. It's feigned, borrowed, weaponized. And betrayal doesn't need a reason, just an opportunity. Weddings in the castle aren't celebrations. They're negotiations with better music. The garlands are fresh, the wine flows, and someone always cries, but never for the reasons they say. You watch the bride smile with all the warmth of a prisoner accepting her sentence. The groom bows, thanks the guests, and studies her like a map he's been told to conquer. There's a feast, a toast, a kiss that means nothing. Then everyone pretends they've just witnessed a miracle. You don't marry for love here. You marry for alliances, land, and the weight of someone else's name. Sometimes you marry because your uncle lost a wager during a siege and promised your hand in exchange for a cart of grain and 2 barrels of salt pork. Sometimes it's because a lord's youngest son needs a bride and your dowry includes a river. Most of the time, it's because someone powerful decided it was time you stopped being a pawn and started being a piece on the board. They announce the match like a gift. You've been chosen, they say, as if it's an honor. As if your stomach doesn't twist into knots at the thought. You nod, you bow, you say thank you. No one asks what you want. That question isn't part of the ritual. There's too much at stake to entertain something as fragile as preference. You've seen what love looks like in the castle. A sideways glance. A pause too long in the corridor. A hand brushing another beneath the table. Love is a risk, not a right. And it always comes at a cost. A stable girl who caught the eye of a visiting knight was found scrubbing chamber pots 2 days later, her hair shorn and her hands raw. No one said it was punishment. They just called it reassignment. The ones who do fall in love rarely survive it. At best, they're sent away. At worst, they're married off sooner, faster, with more ceremony and less warning. One lady of the court disappeared for 3 weeks and returned with a husband twice her age and a bruise just beneath her collarbone. She smiled the entire feast and never once met anyone's eyes. Now she walks like her body remembers something she won't say. There are whispers, always. Stories of a young squire and a noble's daughter who vanished into the woods. Of 2 knights who rode out together and never came back. Of servants caught in shadowed corners, mouths pressed tight in fear and hunger. These aren't fairy tales. They're cautionary ones. And they never have happy endings. The wedding chamber is another kind of cell, draped in silk, perfumed with lavender and rose, but no less confining. The bed is wide, the sheets cold, and the door always closes with a finality you can't ignore. You don't choose who lies beside you. You simply endure them. You learn their rhythms, their expectations, their silences. You keep your face pleasant, your voice soft, and your thoughts buried somewhere deeper than even you can reach. If children come, they are counted, weighed, and immediately assigned value. A son is a future knight, a name-bearer, a reason to smile in public. A daughter is a bargaining chip, an investment. You hold them like they're precious, because they are. But not to you. Not really. To the castle, to the family, to the line. You watch them grow and wonder if they'll marry better or worse than you did. You hope they'll be clever enough to hide their hearts early. You tell them stories, yes, but not the ones about love. You tell them about loyalty, obedience, duty, because that's all that matters here. And because you know what happens to those who forget it. Sometimes, when the night is quiet and the fire burns low, You remember a boy you once met in the orchard, or a girl who gave you a ribbon and laughed like she meant it. You wonder what would have happened if you'd run, if you'd said no, if you'd chosen anything other than the path laid before you. But the castle doesn't allow detours. You don't marry for love. You marry for survival. And if you're lucky, your cage will be velvet-lined. The stairs to the dungeon spiral downward, too tight for comfort and too steep for safety. No one walks them unless they must. They're slick with condensation and streaked with something darker in the cracks. A smear here, a stain there. You don't ask what it is. You hold the torch higher, though the flame gutters with every damp breath of stone. The air changes the moment you descend. It grows thick, stale, heavy with the weight of breath that was exhaled centuries ago and never escaped. You've never been told what's down there. You've only been told not to ask. But you've heard it. Everyone has. The castle might groan and settle at night, but the dungeon doesn't make polite noises. It screams, low at first, then louder, as if someone's throat has remembered how to work after hours of silence. Sometimes it's a word. Sometimes it's just noise. But always, always, it's enough to make you pause in whatever you're doing, to listen hard, and to wish you hadn't. They say the oubliette is the worst part. A hole in the floor, stone-lined and narrow, just wide enough to drop a person in and forget them. That's what the word means, to forget. You're not killed there. You're erased. No rope, no ladder, no light. Just time and the rats and the echo of your own breath getting shallower each day. If you're lucky, you die fast. If you're not, the hunger takes you slow. Slower than you'd believe possible. Someone's down there now. You know because the guards changed their route yesterday. Posted extra watch near the southern corridor. You know because a bucket of water went missing and no one complained. You know because the screams have names in them now. Names of lords, of gods, of anyone who might be listening. Sometimes they sob. Sometimes they chant. Sometimes they go quiet mid-cry, like something suddenly reached them in the dark. No one talks about who gets sent down. Not publicly. But word spreads fast in a place where survival depends on listening. A page who spoke too freely. A knight whose loyalty wavered. A noble's lover who refused to stay bought. They're gone now. Their names erased from rosters. Their rooms cleaned out before nightfall. Their fates sealed in silence and the clink of chains echoing underfoot. You wonder what they did. You wonder what you've done. Because the rules shift here. They bend for some and break others. One wrong phrase. One glance held too long. One truth spoken at the wrong table. And suddenly you're a problem. Problems get solved quickly in the castle. Sometimes with poison, sometimes with exile, and sometimes with a quiet trip down the south stairs, flanked by guards who won't meet your eye. The chains are real. You've seen them once, when the door to the lower hall was left open a moment too long. Iron rings set deep into the walls, too high to sit, too low to stand. Shackles still stained with rust and skin. There was a smell down there. Not just rot, but fear thick enough to taste. You told yourself it was mold. You still do. But your stomach didn't believe you then. And it doesn't now. You dream about it sometimes. Not just the dungeon, but being in it. The walls closing in, the torch going out, the sound of boots walking away up the stairs. You wake with your hands clenched into fists and your breath caught in your throat. Then you check the door, whisper a prayer you don't remember learning, and go back to pretending it's never going to be your turn. But deep down, you know no one's safe here. Not really. The dungeon waits for everyone. It just hasn't picked you yet. The tower rises above the rest of the castle like a finger pointed at the sky in accusation. From below, it looks noble, defiant even. But once you're inside, the illusion dies. The air is colder there, sharper, thin as old paper. Stone walls wrap around you like they're waiting for you to break first. And they usually don't have to wait long. You climb the stairs one step at a time, spiraling upward, counting each turn as if it might save you. The stairs are narrow, slick with moss in some places, ice in others. There's no railing, nothing between you and a long, ragged tumble into the dark. You keep one hand on the wall, even though it's damp and clammy like a dead man's skin. The torch you carry sputters with every gust of wind sneaking through the arrow slits, and still the shadows multiply. There are doors at certain landings, thick oak things bound in iron. Behind some, nobles are locked in quiet disgrace, exiled not to distant lands but to height. They sit in rooms with a single window and a view of everything they used to own. You don't hear them often, but you know they're still there. Occasionally there's a cough, a clink of a plate, a sob that slips through the stone like a draft. You once passed a boy bringing food to the topmost chamber. His eyes were hollow. His hands trembled as he held the tray. You asked who it was for. He said nothing, just shook his head and kept walking, slower than he needed to, like he was afraid of arriving. They say the tower is for reflection, for penance, for silence. But really, it's for forgetting. No one climbs the tower unless they're being punished, protected, or erased. Sometimes all three. It's not a prison officially, but prisoners live there. So do traitors, widows, madmen, and old lords too dangerous to kill, but too useless to keep around. It's where you send someone when you want them to suffer quietly. The madness comes fast up here. Maybe it's the cold. Maybe it's the stillness. Maybe it's the way the wind howls against the walls every night, like it's trying to dig through and pull the soul out of whoever's left inside. You've heard them talk to themselves, those who lasted more than a week, whispering names into the stone, making bargains with birds that land on the window ledge, laughing without any rhythm, without any reason. One threw himself from the highest window last winter. They said it was the guilt or the fever or both. They never found his body. The snow took it, or the dogs did. No one asked too many questions. Another noble vanished completely. The guard swore he was there at sunset. By morning, the room was empty and the window unlatched. No footprints, no blood, just a cold plate of food and a letter no one could read. The tower plays tricks. It warps time. Days pass without meaning. The bells don't reach this high. You lose track of the sun. Meals come irregularly, sometimes twice in a day, sometimes not at all. You knock for warmth, for water, for noise. No one answers. You begin to wonder if you're still real. If you ever were. Those sent up rarely come down. If they do, they're different. Paler, quieter, eyes ringed with something too deep for sleep to fix. You've seen one or two re-enter court life, smiling with lips that don't move quite right. People treat them gently, like cracked glass. But no one trusts them. Not really. Because everyone knows the tower doesn't give you back the same person. It takes something every time. Sometimes it's memory. Sometimes it's loyalty. Sometimes it's your name. The tower doesn't care why you came, only that you did. And when the door closes behind you, the rest of the world keeps turning without you, as if you were never there at all. The first time something falls on you from above, you tell yourself it's dust. Maybe a flake of dried mortar. You brush it away and move on. But it happens again and again. Little specks, black or gray, sometimes still twitching. They land in your food, your hair, your open mouth if you're unlucky enough to yawn near a window. Soon you realize it isn't dust. It's part of something alive, something living just out of reach in the hidden world above your head. The ceiling in the great hall is beautiful. Carved beams, heavy arches, centuries of soot darkening the wood to a glossy black. But beauty fades the closer you look. Behind the ornamentation is a war zone, a territory ruled by wings, claws, and droppings. You can't see them clearly during the day, but you hear them, shuffling, rustling, tiny skittering feet crawling across beams that groan when the wind shifts. The ceiling creaks like it's whispering secrets. And those secrets always land in your bowl of stew. The pigeons are the worst, fat, arrogant things that perch just above the chandeliers. They coo all day like bored nobility and leave reminders of their presence in greasy white splatters across the stone floor. No one can stop them. Nets have been tried. Spikes, scarecrows made of rags, and broken broomsticks. One servant even tossed a lit torch toward the rafters in frustration. He missed. The torch didn't. It started a fire that took 3 hours to put out and cost the steward 2 fingers. The pigeons came back the next day. Bats claim the night. When the last torch is snuffed and the castle sinks into cold silence, they emerge like a curse, silent, sudden, everywhere. You'll feel one brush past your ear like a whisper made of leather. You'll see shadows dart across the walls, twisting like smoke. You tell yourself they're eating the bugs, that they're helpful. But then you wake up to something warm and soft in your bedroll. And when you grab it, it screams and bites. You don't scream, because that would be weakness. But you bleed anyway. And still the mites win. They're invisible at first, hiding in the hay, stuffed between beams for insulation, nesting in thatch, burrowing deep into warm crevices high above. You feel them long before you see them. A prickling on your neck, a bite on your thigh, a trail of welts crawling across your ribs. They don't care if you're clean. They don't care if you're noble. They fall from the ceiling like snow, tiny parasitic snow that burrows into your tunic and drinks your blood. You know it's the ceiling. You know because when you sleep in the courtyard, the itching stops. When you stay near the hearth, it slows. But in the center of the hall, beneath that grand ancient roof, the crawling always returns. You watch others scratch too, pretending it's just an itch. No one wants to admit they've been conquered by something too small to see. That would mean surrendering to the unseen. Servants mutter about cursed beams, about infestations that no fire can kill, about birds that aren't birds and bats that don't cast shadows. Some swear they've heard voices from the rafters. Not human voices, but dry, papery things that chitter and mock, speaking in a tongue no one dares translate. They speak of movement in the straw above the chapel, of a shape with too many legs slithering across the ceiling during Mass. The priest said nothing. He just prayed harder. No one climbs into the rafters. Not anymore. The last man who did never came down. They found his boot a week later, wedged between two beams. It was still warm. You start wearing your cloak over your head. You eat quickly and keep your mouth shut. You avoid looking up. You avoid standing still beneath the widest beams. You joke that the ceiling hates you, but deep down, you're not joking. Because it does. It watches. It waits. And it always finds a way down. The castle smells like old breath trapped in stone. It clings to the walls, to the rushes, to the folds of your tunic. Sweat, smoke, rotting wood, boiled meat, and something faintly metallic, like blood that dried long ago and refused to forget. You notice it most when you come back from the outside. Fresh air is dangerous like that. It reminds you how far you've fallen. There's no soap, not real soap, anyway. If you're lucky, someone crushed some herbs into lard and called it cleansing. More often you're given ashes. Actual ashes. Cold gray grit from the hearth. You mix it with a little water, rub it on your skin until it stings, and rinse with whatever you can find. Barrel water, rain water, or the thin trickle from the cracked cistern near the lower courtyard. You don't feel clean afterward. You feel scraped. To brush your teeth, you chew twigs. You've snapped more than one, trying to find one that's not too bitter, not too splintered. You run the frayed end over your teeth, scraping off the grime, hoping it gets under the film of old meat from yesterday's stew. Your gums bleed by the second stroke. You spit out pink water. Rinse. Repeat. Some people don't even try. You can smell it on them when they talk. Breath like curdled milk and spoiled onions. Bathing is a production. First you need a tub, which is more a barrel sawed in half than anything inviting. Then you need water, lots of it, carried in buckets from the well or siphoned from a nearby stream, assuming it hasn't frozen over. Then you heat it pot by pot over an open flame. It takes over an hour to warm enough for a soak that lasts maybe 10 minutes. And then you're expected to pour the water out so someone else can use the tub. Sometimes they don't even bother emptying it between turns. You try not to think about that. There are no towels, just old cloths that never quite dry and always smell faintly of mold. You dry yourself by the fire if you're lucky, by wind if you're desperate. And you pray the cold doesn't crack your skin open like old leather. Because once you break the skin, it doesn't heal quickly here. Infection comes fast, riding the damp air and the dirty nails of your neighbors. You wash your clothes maybe once a month. That means dragging them down to the stream, pounding them on rocks, and holding your breath as the color of the water darkens. They never really come clean, just less filthy. The mud never fully lifts. The stains set like stories. You know whose cloak was caught in a spill of goat's blood, whose sleeves reek of ale, whose trousers bear the unmistakable mark of a chamber pot misjudged in the dark. Lice are a given. You pick them from your scalp like seeds from bread. You burn them between your fingernails. Fleas burrow in the seams of your socks. Mites live in the folds of your cloak. There are salves, greasy, foul-smelling things made from pig fat and crushed mint. They keep the worst infestations at bay. But you still itch. You always itch. And when you don't, that's when you worry. Because a lack of itching sometimes means the parasites have burrowed deeper, past skin, into tissue, into places you can't reach. Privy smells cling to you no matter how far you walk from the castle walls. Your boots track waste from the courtyards. Your hands carry traces of everything you've touched. Torches, door handles, half-rotted bread, someone else's shoulder. You wipe them on your tunic and call it clean. There's no soap. There's no ritual. There's only the hope that whatever's growing under your nails won't kill you. You remember a time, maybe, when you thought hygiene meant perfume and bathhouses, clean linen, a brush for your hair. But here, hygiene is a whispered fantasy. Something the nobles speak of in distant tones as they scrub themselves with scented cloths that haven't seen real dirt in weeks. Even they aren't truly clean, just better at pretending. The rest of you live in layers of sweat, of filth, of resignation. You scrape it off when you can. You ignore it when you can't. You keep moving, because to stop means to smell yourself fully. And that's a luxury no one can afford. Here, cleanliness is a myth. Survival is the only ritual that matters. It always starts with a cough. Just one. Dry at first, hidden behind a sleeve. Ignored like a fly buzzing in the corner of a room. But it echoes in stone halls. And before the day ends, you hear another. Then three. Then too many to count. No one says anything at first. They just pull their cloaks tighter and pretend their throats aren't tightening. But by nightfall, the fever has a name. They don't ring alarms in the castle when someone gets sick. There's no bell to warn you that death is walking the corridors again. You just notice the silence. Someone misses their shift. A chamber door stays shut. Trays begin to pile outside rooms where no one answers anymore. That's how you know. The plague isn't polite. It doesn't announce itself. It waits. Then it pounces. The fever rooms are cold. Not to keep you comfortable. Nothing is ever comfortable, but to slow the rot. You're laid out on straw that hasn't been changed in weeks, alongside others already muttering nonsense to the rafters. There's no medicine, just damp cloths and whispered prayers to saints who've long stopped listening. If your fever breaks, you live. If it doesn't, someone else uses your blanket by morning. You don't want to be touched, but they touch you anyway, to carry you, to restrain you, to bleed you. The castle believes in balance. The bad humors must be let out. So they bring in the barber surgeon, and you wish they hadn't. His knives are never clean. His fingers always smell of herbs, sweat, and iron. He doesn't ask for permission. He just cuts. He says he's drawing out the sickness. You're not sure if he means from your body or from the walls. Either way, your blood darkens the rags, and you feel no better. Sometimes worse. He sets leeches on your limbs, fat, sluggish things that squirm as they bite. You watch them swell and wonder if they'll explode. You wonder if you'll beat them to it. The healer's apprentice died last week. She caught the fever trying to soothe a coughing child and never made it back to her own bed. No one touched her body. They just rolled her in a blanket and left her by the west door. The rats found her before the priests did. She was 16. People wear charms around their necks now, bits of dried herbs, bones carved with sigils, scraps of metal from the chapel gates. Anything to ward off what's coming. But the illness doesn't care for charms. It doesn't care who you are or how clean your hands are or how many gods you've promised to serve. It takes what it wants, and it leaves nothing but sweat-soaked beds and the echo of screams. The worst part isn't the pain. It's the waiting. You feel fine for a day. Then your joints ache. Your eyes sting. Your gums bleed when you spit. You tell yourself it's the weather, that the stew was off, that you slept poorly. But you know. You always know. Some try to run. They leave the castle in the middle of the night, barefoot and wild-eyed, thinking the wind and open fields will save them. Most don't make it to the gates. Those that do rarely make it back. You hear stories from the guards, how they find the bodies face down in the mud, mouths open, throats raw from screaming. And still the castle continues. Meals are served. Doors are locked. Chores are done. The sick are ignored unless they collapse in the halls, in which case they're dragged aside with the same urgency as sweeping ash from the hearth. Life moves forward, because if it stopped for every death, the whole place would grind to dust in a month. You carry a handkerchief now, not because it helps, but because it hides. You cough into it and lie about the sound. You claim the chill of the cellar has your chest tight. You smile when others look, but not too wide. Never too wide, because fear spreads faster than fever. And in the castle, illness isn't a guest. It's a ruler, one that doesn't knock. The chapel smells of melted wax and damp stone. It's supposed to be a place of peace, of clarity, of divine shelter in a world thick with mud and betrayal. But the second you step inside, you know it's just another room with secrets. The kind that cling to the floor like dried blood. The kind that echo in whispered prayers and eyes that never close all the way. The altar is simple, wooden, scorched at the edges from a fire no one speaks of anymore. A tattered cloth hangs over it, once white, now closer to the color of old teeth. Candles flicker along the walls, their light more shadow than glow. You kneel at the bench, back stiff, eyes forward, hands folded like you remember from childhood. You recite the prayers. You move your lips. But your thoughts are not with heaven. They are with the man behind you who hasn't blinked in a full minute. The chapel is never empty. Someone is always watching. A rival, a spy, a friend whose loyalty you no longer trust. You see them in the corners of your eye, cloaked and still, hands clasped like saints. But no one is here just to pray. They come to listen, to scheme, to judge how long you kneel and what names you murmur. The priest walks slowly. He wears black, even when he doesn't have to, as if mourning something you can't name. He smiles often, too often. His sermons are gentle, but his eyes scan the room like he's tallying souls, weighing each one like meat. He speaks of sin, of salvation, of the narrow path to grace. But his hands are soft and clean, unlike the ones who serve real gods with dirt under their nails and truth on their tongues. Last month, a noble confessed too much. His body was found near the well, face down, hands bound, lips sewn shut. The priest led the funeral procession. He wept. No one else did. You light a candle, not because you believe it helps, but because not lighting one might be noticed. You whisper a name, not your own, and pray it will do. You pray for safety, for silence, for one more day without another door closing behind you. And when you open your eyes, someone has shifted closer. You don't turn to look. You just know. A soldier confessed his doubts aloud once. Said he didn't think heaven was listening anymore. The priest forgave him with a hand on the shoulder and a smile. The next week, the soldier was sent to the wall during a storm, wearing armor that didn't fit and boots with cracked soles. He froze. They said it was chance. Everyone knew better. Even the statues in the chapel don't comfort you. Their faces are worn smooth by time, their eyes gone, their mouths twisted by moisture and rot. They stand in niches, looming over you like witnesses, not guardians. You wonder if the saints remember who they were supposed to be. You wonder if they ever did. Sometimes confessions disappear, written ones, placed carefully in the box by those too frightened to speak. You slipped one in once. 3 lines about something you saw in the kitchens. Something that could ruin someone. The next day, the box was empty. The cook was gone. The priest thanked you with a nod. You don't write another. The nobles take communion first. They kneel longer, louder, with words like honey and eyes like knives. You keep your head down. You accept the wafer. You don't taste it. You try not to think about whose hands touched it before yours. You try not to flinch when the priest's fingers brush your lips. You nod, rise, return to your bench. Your stomach aches from the broth you didn't finish at breakfast. Or maybe it's the nerves. Or maybe it's the knowledge that this is not sanctuary, not safety, not anything close to holy. It's a stage, and you are always performing. You leave the chapel quietly, the same way you entered, with your mouth closed and your back straight. You don't speak until the door closes behind you, and even then, only to yourself. You wake to the sound of horns, but it isn't a song. It's the kind of blare that vibrates inside your ribs, that pulls you out of half-sleep before your eyes even open. Then come the shouts. Men barking orders, others just screaming. The ground beneath you trembles, not from footsteps, but from impact. Something heavy is hitting the outer gate. Again and again. The siege has begun. You grab your boots and run without lacing them. Everyone is moving. No direction, no formation, just movement. Soldiers spill into the courtyards like ants from a burning hill. The archers are already at their stations, their faces pale under the morning fog. Servants carry barrels. Some stumble. One slips on wet straw and doesn't get up. You're handed a pot. It's hot, heavy, and sloshing with something dark. You ask what it is. The man who gives it to you doesn't answer. He just shoves it into your arms and pushes you toward the stairs. You climb. Each step is slick with dew and panic. At the top, the world opens, and what you see steals your breath. They've surrounded the castle. A sea of tents and torches and bodies, all moving with purpose. You can't count them. You try anyway, but the numbers spiral in your head. Too large, too fast. Banners flap in the wind. Not your own. The enemy has names you know and names you don't. Some once dined in the very hall you served in last week. They're here now, not for bread, but for blood. You're told to hold the wall. So you do. You crouch behind the stone rampart, the pot beside you, and try to remember what you were told about tar. Boil it. Pour it. Don't let it spill on your own hands. You peek over the edge, heart hammering. Below, ladders are being dragged forward. Siege towers roll closer, slow and unstoppable. A man beside you vomits into the corner, then wipes his mouth and knocks an arrow. Another prays under his breath, lips moving too fast to form words. You grip the handle of your pot and wonder how many others were sent up here with nothing but boiling death and a hope they don't miss. The first ladder hits the wall with a crack like bones splitting. Hands appear, dirty, armored, grasping. Someone screams, not in pain, in rage. Steel clashes. The archer fires point-blank into a face rising over the wall. Another man swings a mace and knocks the climbing soldier down. But more replace him before the thud of the body fades. A shout. Your name. You're up. You grab the pot with shaking hands, lift it above your head, and stagger toward the nearest ladder. You don't look at the men below. You look at the angle, the curve of the stone, the way the boiling surface ripples with every heartbeat. Then you pour. It hisses as it hits. The scream is instant and awful. Flesh cooks. Armor warps. You drop the empty pot and step back. The smell of burning hair curls into your nose and stays there. You don't know if you hit the right man. You don't know if it mattered. Another ladder. Another charge. You're handed a second pot. This time you don't ask what's in it. You lose track of time. It blurs into a loop of lifting, pouring, ducking. The sun crawls higher. The bodies pile up. The stones run slick with more than water. Somewhere below, a ram slams into the gate. Each hit shakes your spine. Dust falls from the tower above. You think about the floors beneath you, the ones that groan when it rains. You wonder if they'll hold. By midday, you can't hear much. The roar is constant. Drums from outside. War cries from within. Metal against metal. Screams from both sides. Your voice is gone. Your arms ache. You've burned your fingers, but you can't stop. If you stop, someone else has to do it. And maybe they'll miss. Then silence. Not total, but enough. The ladders retreat. The towers roll back. Horns again, but not yours. They're called to fall back. You don't cheer. You don't move. You just sit back against the wall, hands blistered, tunics soaked with sweat, blood, something else. You're not sure who won. You're not sure this counts as winning. The pot beside you is still half full. You leave it there. You know they'll be back. It starts with a sound you can't place. Not footsteps, not shouting. Something slower, wetter, a scrape, a shuffle, a faint splash that seems too low to worry about. But you worry anyway, because in a castle under siege, silence is the only thing more dangerous than noise. You're posted in the corridor near the servants' wing. Not glamorous, but close enough to hear if the gate falls. You stand beside a narrow archway that leads down to the garderobe, a stone seat over a vertical shaft, meant for relieving yourself with as much dignity as a hole in the floor allows. You never liked being near it. No one does. The stink drifts up like a ghost with a grudge. The air there is always warmer than it should be. Tonight, it's quiet. Too quiet. The sound comes again. You freeze. Another splash. Then something hollow brushing against stone. Maybe it's an animal. Maybe it's runoff. Maybe it's your imagination playing tricks on your exhaustion. But then the stench sharpens. Not just waste. Fresh blood and wet leather. You step forward, grip your spear, and peer down the corridor toward the chamber where the shoot begins. It's dark. The torchlight doesn't reach that far. You should call for help. You don't. You move instead, slow and stupid, like a man walking toward thunder, convinced it's only wind. The door to the latrine is ajar. That's wrong. It should be shut, locked during siege protocol. You touch the wood with the tip of your spear and push. It swings inward with a groan. And that's when you see it. A boot, just the toe, slick with filth and sludge, emerging from the shaft like the start of a nightmare. Then a hand, gloved and shaking, reaching for the rim of the seat. Then a face, pale, soaked, streaked with grime and ash, eyes wide and wild, but focused. Not a beggar, not a ghost. An enemy. He's climbing up through the waste chute. You freeze. Your stomach turns. The man gasps and grips the stone like a drowning sailor. His armor is padded and blackened with soot. He must have crawled through hundreds of feet of sewage, through every foul thing ever dumped from the castle's bowels. His expression isn't rage. It's purpose. He isn't alone. Another hand follows. Another set of eyes. You hear breath muffled by cloth wrapped around mouths and noses. They came prepared. This isn't madness. It's a plan. You swing your spear hard and fast, striking the first man's wrist. He snarls but doesn't fall. His knife flashes, slick and short, meant for stabbing in close quarters. You lunge again, and this time you connect with his shoulder. He slips back into the chute with a splash that turns your stomach. But more hands are coming. You run, not out of fear, though that burns in your chest too, but because you understand now. They're inside, not at the gate, not on the wall. Inside, in the pipes, the cracks, the places no one guards because no one sane would crawl through them. You sprint down the corridor, past sleeping servants, past stacked linens, past the wine cellar no one locked because it didn't matter yesterday. You shout. It echoes. Someone grabs a torch. Another draws a sword. Too late. The garderobe spills over. 3 men in black lurch out of the stone shaft like rats pulled from the flood. They're covered in waste, steaming in the cold air, eyes burning through slits in cloth masks. One slips on the floor. Another drives a blade into the chest of a boy barely old enough to shave. The third runs toward the stairwell, toward the great hall. The castle isn't a fortress anymore. It's a funnel. Everything narrows. The halls twist. The guards panic. No one knows where to run or what to protect. A woman throws boiling wine. A stable hand fights with a broom. The men who came through the latrine aren't many, but they're already too far in. And now they're not alone. You hear shouting from the courtyard. More ladders. More screams. The latrine wasn't the invasion. It was the distraction, the proof that nowhere is safe. That every dark corner is a doorway if you're desperate enough. Welcome to medieval warfare, where death rides ladders and crawls through sewers. The first breach doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like stone sobbing. A low, grinding groan that rises through the soles of your feet and settles deep in your ribs. The wall gives way, not all at once, but in a slow, crumbling collapse, stones tumbling like teeth from a rotten mouth. And then the roar comes, not from the wall, but from the army that's been waiting to pour through it. You don't run. Not immediately. You freeze, holding a ladle. Of all things, the kitchen was meant to be safe, tucked behind the great hall, beneath a vaulted ceiling that smelled of bread and burnt meat. But the moment the shouting starts, you realize no room is safe anymore. A scullion screams. A pot shatters. Someone drops a tray and it echoes like a bell announcing your doom. You run because everyone else does. Through the corridors you memorized in childhood, up staircases that wobble beneath your weight. You pass soldiers bloodied and swaying, eyes wide with confusion. Some raise swords. Others raise hands. None of them know where the enemy is anymore, because now they're everywhere. The fire spreads faster than the swords. A tapestry ignites near the chapel. Arrows tipped in flame arc through windows high above. The smoke doesn't wait. It follows you, clings to your skin, fills your mouth until you're coughing more than breathing. In the great hall, chaos wears velvet. The nobles haven't prepared for this. Not really. Their escape plans involve messengers and delay. Their boots are decorative. Their cloaks catch fire easier than hay. One trips over a bench and is trampled by his cousin, who carries a goblet and nothing else. Another slaps a servant for being too slow, then turns and begs that same servant to save his wife. The servant vanishes. So does the wife. You find the heavy oak table at the center of the room, the one where they held feasts and whispered treason, and you dive beneath it. Your knees hit stone. Your breath comes in ragged bursts. You can hear your heart louder than the battle, and still you do not move. From your hiding place, you see feet. Some bare, some armored, one pair dragging as if their owner is already half dead. Screams ripple through the room like waves crashing against a broken shore. Steel rings on steel. Wood splinters. Someone calls for mercy. Someone else laughs. A man falls beside your table. You don't look at his face. You don't want to know who he is. He doesn't move again. The smoke thickens. It seeps under the table, wraps around your legs. You stifle a cough and squeeze your eyes shut. You try to pray, but the only words that come are names. Yours. The people you've served. The ones who are likely dead now. The ones who might have betrayed you yesterday. You hear the front doors crash inward. Wind and ash rush in. The invaders don't wear your colors. They don't care about who sat where. They don't ask for surrender. They split the world open one step at a time. Someone flips the table. You roll. Your hands hit something wet. Wine or blood. You can't tell. You scramble beneath a bench, breath catching in your throat. A soldier sees you. His eyes are gray. His face is blank. His sword rises. He stops. Not because of mercy, because another man tackles him from the side. They crash through a burning beam. And neither gets up. You don't question it. You crawl through soot, through debris, through what used to be the place you served, ate, laughed, feared. You don't know what's left outside, if anything. But you know what's behind you now. A castle not dying. A castle already dead. The battle ends, but nothing feels over. The horns stop. The shouting fades. The clang of swords and the crack of splintering shields dissolve into silence, thick and unnatural. You wait for the sound of celebration, for music or cheers, or even the rattling stomp of victory. It never comes. Only wind now, sifting through ashes and bones. They didn't raise the castle. That would have been a kindness. Instead, they took what they wanted, gold, weapons, silk, and left the rest to rot. Fires still smolder in the west wing, painting the sky with a haze that never lifts. Stone blackens, but refuses to fall. The gate still stands, though crooked. The well is poisoned. The chapel looted. The courtyard is a graveyard with no markers, only stains. You're still alive, but it doesn't feel like survival. The people left behind don't speak unless they have to. Words are rationed now, like bread. Some sit in corners with hollow stares and hands that tremble when touched. Others bury themselves in useless routines, sweeping soot, sorting burnt linens, patching windows with cloth that can't stop the wind. You wander between them, unsure if you're one of them or something else entirely. Rot sets in faster than rebuilding. The air is damp with sickness. Coughs echo down the halls like reminders that death still lives here, just quieter now. The fever takes 3 more before week's end. There's no burial, just cloth-wrapped bundles dragged to the garden and left beneath scorched hedges. No one has the strength to dig. Food is worse than scarce. The invaders stripped the stores down to the grain sacks and salted pork. All that remains is a few rotting turnips and a bucket of weevilled flour. You boil roots until they disintegrate. Drink broth that tastes like earth and metal, and pretend it helps. Hunger dulls the senses first, then the soul. And still you don't leave. There's nowhere to go. Outside the walls is winter and wild dogs and raiders looking for what little the victors missed. Inside is cold stone and fewer friends every day. Those who were nobles walk like they're still owed something. Those who were servants have stopped bowing. The hierarchy cracks, then shatters. Titles mean nothing when everyone is filthy and barefoot. Fights break out in the corridor outside the old armory, over bread, over blankets, over a dry place to sleep. One man pulls a knife and cuts another from ear to chin. Blood spills down the wall. No one stops it. No one buries him either. The body disappears that night. No one asks where it went. You find yourself watching people more closely, listening to their silences. The old steward clutches his ledger like it will protect him. A maid hoards beeswax candles in her mattress. The blacksmith sharpens knives and stares too long at everyone who walks past. Trust has become a memory. You catch your own reflection in a shattered goblet. Your skin is gray, your eyes sunken. You look like a ghost haunting your own life. You can't remember the last time you slept through the night. Every sound startles. Every shadow feels like a blade. Someone starts talking about rebuilding. Someone else laughs in their face. A boy dies from an infected wound. No one knows who he belonged to. A girl vanishes one night after asking for firewood. The next morning, her shoes are found by the gate. You keep your mouth shut and your back to the wall. You don't go anywhere alone. Hope is a dangerous thing now. It makes people desperate. It makes people cruel. The castle still stands, but it's hollow. A shell filled with echoes and smoke. You hear whispers about leaving, about sneaking into the forest, about finding another lord, another cause, another place untouched by flame and rot. But you've seen what's out there. You've seen what's inside. You stay, because at least here, the ghosts know your name. It begins with the smell, not the rot of food or the lingering stench of the latrine chute. This is different. Thicker, sweet and sour all at once, like meat left in the sun with a sheet of curdled air over it. It seeps into the fabric of your tunic, into your hair, into the cracks of your teeth. You scrub your skin with ashes and cold water, but it doesn't lift. It doesn't fade. It just becomes part of you. The bodies were never buried. There were too many, too fast, and not enough hands to carry them. At first, people tried, wrapped them in old cloaks, dragged them to corners of the courtyard, lined them against walls like they were waiting for something. But the ground was frozen. The shovels were broken. No one had the strength. And eventually, no one cared. Now they lie where they fell, under shattered beams, behind overturned tables, piled like firewood in the chapel's cloister, their limbs twisted and pressed tight, eyes wide and staring. Some are missing faces. Others are too blackened to recognize. A few are still warm. You stop checking after the second one. At night, you hear whispers, not voices exactly, more like breath that forgets to leave the room. You tell yourself it's the wind or the shifting of burnt wood. But then the whisper follows you down the corridor, and it knows your name. You sleep on stone. You used to have straw, but it crawled with lice. And someone stole your blanket 2 nights ago. You lie down with your back to the wall and your face toward the doorway, just in case. You haven't closed both eyes in days. You try, but every time you do, you see them. Not the dead, the dying. The boy with the split lip who asked for water. The girl with blood in her teeth who didn't scream. The noblewoman you pushed aside in the rush for the gate. She tripped. You didn't go back. You still hear her fall. It loops in your head like a song with no end. Guilt curls itself around your ribs. It isn't loud. It's a constant pressure, like a hand just beneath your skin, tapping once every few minutes to remind you. You tell yourself you did what anyone would have done. That survival isn't a crime. That you didn't mean to leave them. That you couldn't have saved them. But the dead don't need your excuses. They just keep showing up. You see one near the well, a man with no lower jaw, his tongue swinging like wet rope. You blink and he's gone. You smell her perfume, rose and vinegar, the scent Lady Tamsin always wore. But she burned with the chapel. You saw her dress catch. You still hear her shriek. You stop eating the bread. The last batch tasted off, bitter, like the edge of old coins. Someone said it might be spoiled, the grain infested. Someone else said the sickness is in the flour now. Mold that makes your tongue swell, your mind melt. Hallucinations. Madness. You don't know if what you see is real. You don't ask, because asking means someone might answer. The stench is everywhere now. In the rushes on the floor, in the folds of curtains that once lined the great hall. It leaks from the walls like old secrets. You breathe through a cloth soaked in vinegar when you can find some. Most days you don't bother. It's part of life here now. Death doesn't knock anymore. It just lingers. Someone tries to light a fire in the east wing to burn the worst of the dead. The smoke rolls through the corridors, thick and greasy, and someone else chokes to death. You think about running. You think about hiding. You think about standing very still and letting the ghost take you, just to see if they really can. You choose to stay awake instead. You sit against a cold column, knees tucked to your chest, eyes wide, watching the darkness shift around the edges of the room. You hum quietly, not a tune, just a note. A sound to remind yourself you're still breathing, that you're still here. And every so often, the shadows hum back. You wake up every day, which is more than most can say. But the word alive doesn't mean what it used to. It doesn't mean whole. It doesn't mean safe. It just means you're still breathing, parts less. And that breathing still hurts. Your back screams every time you stand. Something cracked weeks ago when the ceiling beam collapsed and you dove too late. No one looked. No one asked. You tied it tight with a strip of cloth and bit down on a spoon to keep from yelling. That spoon is still hidden in your pocket. Not because you need it, because it's the only thing you own that hasn't been taken. Your teeth are gone. Most of them anyway. A punch during the food riot loosened 3. One fell out on its own. The others you pulled yourself. In a moment so quiet and bloody, it almost felt sacred. You buried them behind the old stables. Don't know why. Maybe because even broken things deserve a place to rest. You haven't smiled in months. You're not sure if your face remembers how. When you try, your skin pulls in all the wrong ways. It feels like faking joy in a graveyard. There's no one left to smile at. No jokes worth telling. Just days that bleed into nights that cough up more days. You keep moving because if you stop, something inside you will rot. The castle is quiet now. Not peaceful, just quieter. Fewer footsteps, fewer voices. The moans of the dying stopped weeks ago. The rats don't even bother hiding anymore. They dart between boots and climb across the tables like they own the place. You don't blame them. They do. You found a piece of glass once and looked at yourself. Big mistake. Your face isn't your own. Hollow cheeks, yellowed eyes, scars you can't explain. There's dirt that won't wash off no matter how long you scrub. A line across your neck where the collar used to rub raw. And something else, something behind your eyes you can't name. It wasn't there before. You used to keep count. The days, the dead, the times you were almost killed but weren't. But numbers started to feel like lies. You stopped sometime after the snow came. Or maybe before. Time doesn't pass here. It drips, slow and thick, like tar sliding down the side of a cracked wall. Others still shuffle around. Survivors like you. They don't talk much, just nod sometimes, barely more than a twitch. Everyone has a story, but no one wants to hear it. There are no heroes left, only people who didn't die when they probably should have. You wonder sometimes if that's worse. There's no plan, no rebuilding, no future. The idea of a future makes you laugh. Not out loud, never out loud, but deep in your chest where the sound dies before reaching your mouth. Some still whisper about escape, about finding another town, another lord, another place that hasn't fallen. But no one leaves. The gates creak, but they don't open. The walls didn't keep the enemy out, but they keep you in. You sit by the same hearth every night. There's no fire, just the blackened stone and the memory of warmth. You watch the shadows crawl as the light fades. You wait for what? You're not sure. Maybe for your body to give up. Maybe for the ceiling to finally fall. Or maybe for nothing. Maybe waiting is all that's left. You're still here. You should be proud. Maybe you lasted. You endured. You played the game and didn't lose. But no one hands out rewards for survival. There's no feast, no glory, just the echo of battles long finished and the soft sound of your own breath still stubbornly filling your lungs. You don't even know what you're surviving for anymore. But you do it anyway. They don't ring a bell when you die. There's no mourning banner hung from the battlements, no black veil drawn over your name. You just stop moving one day, and the castle forgets you fast, faster than you thought possible. It starts with a stumble. Your leg gives out while you're climbing the stairs with a sack of half-burnt firewood. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet slip. You land hard on your shoulder and lie there for a moment, listening to the empty corridor for footsteps that never come. You laugh just once, a breath with edges. You think about standing. You don't. The cold comes in quickly. It creeps into your fingers first, then your toes. You try to curl up, but your limbs aren't listening. Your back pulses with dull pain. You don't cry out, not from pride, just because there's no point. Everyone is busy not dying. Your voice wouldn't carry far, even if they wanted to hear it. You stay there for hours, maybe a day. It's hard to tell. No one checks on you. The walls close in. The drafts deepen. You feel your breath grow shallow, like it's tiptoeing away from your chest. When you stop feeling the stone beneath you, you know it's close. Eventually, someone finds you. A stable hand, maybe. Or a kitchen girl. It doesn't matter. You're not a name anymore. Just wait. They check your wrist for a pulse. Not out of hope, but out of routine. Then they leave to find the others. No urgency, no ceremony. When they come back, they bring a box. It's not a coffin. It's whatever they could find. 2 broken doors nailed together, a wool blanket for padding. You don't fit quite right, but they don't try to fix it. They just wedge your legs in and close the lid with a brick on top. The box doesn't smell any different than the hallways. No one says anything. Not a word. No prayers. No lies about peace or God or rest. Just a grunt as they lift you. 3 to a side, carrying your box like a sack of grain. You're heavier than they expected. Or maybe they're weaker than they used to be. You leave the castle through the postern gate. Not the main one, still half buried in rubble, its chains rusted stiff. The postern creaks open just enough to let you pass. They don't look back as they go, just straight ahead through the frost-bitten field toward the stretch of woods where the ground might be soft enough to dig. If they bury you, it'll be shallow. The spade they're using has no handle. One of them is coughing too hard to help. Another keeps checking over his shoulder, like he's afraid someone will stop them. Or worse, join them. They drop your box on the earth like dropping a burden. You roll slightly. The lid shifts, and for a moment the wind lifts a corner of the blanket. They don't fix it. If the ground's too frozen, they'll leave you. Cover you with leaves. Say they'll return when the thaw comes, and forget exactly where you were left. A fox might find you first. Or rain. Or time. If they bury you, no stone will mark it. No one will remember which pile of rocks hides your ribs, which crooked tree grew roots through your spine. The castle will move on. The rats will reclaim your corner. The The servants will find another name to whisper. The ghosts won't even notice the change. And if you're lucky, truly lucky, no one else will die the same way. But luck doesn't live here anymore. Not in the castle, and not in your box.